Today, human...
President Buhari swears in newly reconstituted ICPC board members.
I am looking forward to ICPC's support to prevent revenue leakage and diversion.
Code of Conduct Tribunal orders suspended Chief Justice Onoge to appear before it next Wednesday.
If he's absent again, I will ask for the appropriate order. His position, he is a person who should obey the summons of the court of law.
More groups identify with the re-election bid of President Buhari.
On Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall look at public officers and assets declaration.
Section 11, subsection 1 of the 1999 Constitution is amended, provides that, and I quote, every public officer shall within 3 months after the coming into office for force of this code of conduct, or immediately after taking office, and thereafter at the end of every 4 years, and that's at the term of the office, submit to the Code of Conduct Bureau a written declaration of all his properties, assets, liabilities, and those of his unmarried children under the age of 18 years. End of quote.
Of course, what you just referred to, Blessing, has to do with a broad range of public officers who are categorized under the 5th schedule to the Constitution, the paragraph of which you have only just indicated. And it is mandatory for public officers up from the president down to the worker at the local government level, elected, appointed, or otherwise engaged by the public service of a federal, state, or local council. Failure to do that, of course, will attract sanctions.
Well, you're quite right, Kingsley. Well, different public officers at different times have made an attempt to actually declare their assets and also to encourage other political appointees to do so.
Yeah, we saw what happened from time to time, usually with the inauguration of a new president, President Buhari, for instance, in May 2015, along with his vice president. They declared their assets. But of course, we also saw what happened with late President Yaradua, who made a public declaration of his assets.
Well, for some, your economists will also believe that an effective income and asset declaration regime can prevent the abuse of power, also reduce corruption, and also increase public accountability. Now, public trust is what we're looking at here, and government legitimacy.
But there are many questions, of course, arising with the constitutional provision mandating public officers to declare assets. Now, how has assets declaration helped in the fight against corruption over the decades? And what should be done to make assets declaration much more effective as a tool in combating corruption? And in particular, to the extent that there is no provision requiring the publication of assets as declared by public officers, what would be wrong if there were now a requirement for the assets of public officers as declared to the Code of Conduct Bureau to also be publicized? What, of course, will be required in terms of the legal or constitutional amendments? These are some of the questions, of course, we intend to put to our guests as we today discuss public officers and assets declaration and how to make it much more effective. It's on that note we'd like to welcome you to this edition of Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you as always on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. I am Kingsley Osadolo.
My name is Blessing Abu. Good to have you join us on today's edition of the program. We're broadcasting live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority, the NTA. As always, we'll get to see some of our segment as a complimentary segment. We'll have a newspaper review. We'll take a look at business, sports, foreign, as well as entertainment news. But right now, Miriam Akpatai is ready to give us the morning news. Good morning to you, Miriam.
Good morning, Kingsley and Blessing. Good morning, Nigerians. Here's the morning news. My name is Miriam Akpata. The Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission, ICPC, has been tasked to come up with stringent preventive policy and strategies for immediate endorsement by government towards taking the fight against corruption to the next level. President Muhammadu Buhari, who issued the order while swearing in the newly appointed chairman and members of the Commission's board, assured them of necessary support as his resolve in diminishing such acts of economic sabotage in Nigeria remains unshaken.
Revenue leakage and diversion. Your skills and expertise must be demonstrated in identifying MDAs highly prone to corruption and what must be done to bring about better governance.
Moving on to the judiciary, the Code of Conduct Tribunal has ordered Justice Walter Onoge to appear before it on Wednesday, 13th of February, when the tribunal will again resume sitting. Chairman of the tribunal, Danladi Umar, issued the order while adjourning sitting after yesterday's proceeding could not hold.
Absent again, I will ask for the appropriate order. I'm not happy that he is not appearing. And by his position, he is a person who should obey the summons of the court of law.
We are in a place where law regulates and guides all human affairs. We are here because the law says we should come here.
Well, still on the judiciary, the Court of Appeal seated in Port Harcourt has granted the application for stay of execution filed by Rivers State APC against the judgment of the Federal High Court, which delisted its candidates from contesting the 2019 general elections. The ruling delivered by Justice Mohammed Mustafa was in respect of the appeal between APC and Senator Magnus Abe, INEC and others.
The jubilation they have now is of no moment because the act sought to be stayed has been completed. And again, the court did not give any order to INEC to put back the names of the people that have been removed.
The support base for re-election of President Muhammadu Buhari of the All Progressives Congress has continued to expand. The latest to identify and proudly associate with his aspiration are 71 retired senior military officers drawn from across the country. Receiving the group on solidarity visit, President Muhammadu Buhari made clear his objective to do the best for Nigeria.
99.9% of our colleagues say that we are proud of you, sir. Proud to be associated with your administration and proud to witness this era of Nigeria rising again under your able leadership. We support you fully and totally in the presidential elections next week and will do whatever we can within the law to contribute to your emergence as the victor in the election in order to take Nigeria to the next level.
President Muhammadu Buhari says anyone found to have cheated or looted the nation will be brought to justice, no matter how highly placed in the society. This was while granting audience to the Southwest imams and Islamic scholars who paid him a solidarity visit. Members of the Women and Youth's presidential campaign team of the All Progressives Congress, chaired by the wife of the president, Aisha Muhammadu Buhari, have met in Abuja in furtherance of their strategy for the overall victory of President Muhammadu Buhari in the forthcoming general elections.
The media activities continue, and we are reaching out and mobilizing key national structures.
We will continue to also go out and attend to rallies and continue to express the achievements of the government and continue to draw the attention of members of the public of the dangers of allowing the opposition to come back.
And we believe that it will continue in this same spirit for the remaining days, trusting that by next week we should disengage and get back to our various states for the door-to-door.
But still on politics, the presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Atiku Abubakar, has assured the people of Edo State of an enabling environment for success. This was at the party's presidential campaign rally. In Benin this Saturday.
I want you to succeed. I appeal to you to vote PDP. We saw prosperity. We saw GSM, revolution, technology, everything. We brought it to this country.
Well, that's the news for now. Good morning, Nigeria continues with Blessing and Kingsley.
Welcome back. If you just tuned in, the program is Good Morning Nigeria. The Federal Ministry of Mines and Steel Development withdraws 4,176 mining titles. This and more on Business News with Chimobi, Walter, and Naj.
The African Development Bank, AFDB, and Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, have signed an agreement to open up the African trade window through the construction of a 1,080-kilometer road. This is with the aim of closing infrastructure gap, create jobs, and reduce unemployment on the continent. Some stakeholders believe this initiative can scale up the current 15% intra-African trade statistics among member countries.
We need it to enhance integration and for development. And the beauty of this road is that there is already an existing east-west coastal road, the design, which starts from Lagos to Calabar, and from there it goes to Cameroon. So when this road is done, it will be connected to the east-west coastal road.
Le commerce intra-africain aujourd'hui à des niveaux très faibles.
As we stand today, intra-regional trade in ECOWAS is very weak. We are doing about 15% amongst ourselves. So there's the need to facilitate and enhance trade in the region. That is why we think that the conduit for trade is infrastructure. And that is why, as a commission, we have prioritized the intra-regional corridors, such as the Abidjan-Lagos corridor, and the Praia-Dakar-Abidjan.
Meanwhile, the Federal Ministry of Mines and Steel Development has revoked 4,176 mining titles between 2011 and 2018. The ministry noted that the revocation of the titles were as a result of failure on the part of licensees to meet up with the required obligation as stipulated in the Nigerian Minerals and Mining Act of 2007 and the regulation of 2011. This, according to the ministry, is aimed at ensuring only genuine investors have access to the mine field, among others. And now to the Nigerian Stock Exchange, where bullish sentiments opened the first trading day of the week, appreciating by 0.35%. The NSE All-Share Index closed at 30,745.05 basis points. Here is a graphic representation of trading figures on the floor of the NSE. For Business News, I'm Chimobi Walter Naji.
Thank you very much, Chimobi, for the business package. Newspaper Review is next on Good Morning Nigeria.
A newspaper reviewer, Bayate is already seated. Good to have you again today.
Thank you, Blessing. Good morning. Good morning, Kinsley. Good morning, Nigeria.
That's right. Blessing, let's begin with you.
Okay, let's take off with the Daily Trust. Leading for the Daily Trust, we have political stories. APC candidates gets lifeline in Rivers and hope in Zamfara as court stays execution of ruling excluding party in Rivers. More details about that story continues on page 5. But just above that story, drama as CCT chair accuses Onoga's lawyer of delay. More details about that on page 3. Agencies still divert funds. It's coming from President Buhari. More details about that on page 12. There you have the photograph of Chairman of the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission, that is ICPC for short, Professor Bolajo Wasonye, with other members of the commission during the swearing-in program by President Muhammad Buhari at the villa yesterday here in Abuja. At the foot of the page, we have smugglers attack customs officer in Kano. And also, Atiku's U.S. visit, a temporary reprieve from graft ban. More details about that on page 7. ECOWAS, African Development Bank, signed $22.7 million grant for Abidjan-Lagos Highway. The story about the CCT chair and Onoga's is the lead story for The Punch this morning. You have CCT chair Onoga's cancel clash. The Senate withdraws the Supreme Court suit. Right after that story, suspended CJN must appear on February 13. It's according to CCT, that's the Code of Conduct Tribunal. More details about that story on page 2. Let's get to see what Kingsley has in his papers.
That's right. The proceedings at the Code of Conduct Tribunal yesterday, they also reported on the front page of the New Telegraph and the Nigerian Pilot. It's the second lead story, that right at the foot of the front page of the New Telegraph. It says, Onoga, CCT chair and Sam in War of Words. And when you come to the Nigerian Pilot, you have it there immediately below the nameplate. It says, we'll apply for bench warrant against Onoga if that's below the nameplate of the Nigerian Pilot. Another headline there says, opposition working to instigate interim government, says Lai Mohammed. That's on page 6. And the story here, this is saying that Nigerian Pilot say Buhari cries out with 4 riders, says government agencies frustrating his anti-corruption drive, notes that revenues are still being diverted by MDAs, insists fighting corruption crucial to Nigeria's development, and regrets that treasury looting has eroded values and ethics. There are other headlines, but Bayo, let's come to you first and then return to the papers.
Well, let's start with the courts. At the Court of Appeal in Port Harcourt Division, the court has ordered a stay of execution in the case of the Rivers APC candidates for the 2019 election. However, when the lawyers came out of the court, the plaintiff counsel said what the court has decided now means that the APC candidates can begin their campaign. The other counsel says that, well, the stay of execution cannot affect what has been done. And he also observed that the court INEC was not represented in court, it did not take any position, and the court did not give any order to INEC to reverse its position. The candidates of the two APC factions are the decision of the High Court, and it directed INEC not to place them on ballot, but on February 11, 5 days to the the presidential election, although the gubernatorial election is March 2nd, the court will make its decision known. The initial decision of the court was that the two factions of the party did not qualify from the primaries that was required in accordance with the electoral law. At the Code of Conduct Tribunal, it started yesterday and it has adjourned till February 13th with the chairman demanding that on that day, the suspended Chief Justice of Nigeria should be at the tribunal to take his plea. The decision to adjourn was reached after arguments, which the papers are harping on. There were tempers were high, but eventually they both apologized to one another, the chairman and the defense counsel. And it's usual in judicial processes, when tempers can be high, they always come to respect the authority of the court, and everybody agrees in deference to the court. At the Court of Appeal, a motion by the suspended Chief Justice to challenge his suspension has also been adjourned to February 12th. There are two other appeals, including one claiming about the violation of his right to fair hearing, and the second one, the violation of the 1999 Constitution. All the three appeals are scheduled for February 12th for decision. Meanwhile, the Senate, which had approached the Supreme Court for interpretation of the suspension of the Chief Justice of Nigeria, says it has withdrawn its case. Ahead of today's hearing, the Senate says it has resolved not to continue because it has confidence in the National Judicial Council, and it will await the outcome of the NJC. However, the Senate caucus of the All Progressive Congress has said that it never met as required by law for the Senate to file a suit at the Supreme Court. It's challenged the suit to object to the inclusion of its members, and it is relying on the Supreme Court decision in original jurisdiction Act of 2002. It provides that for the resolution for the National Assembly, either the House of Rep or Senate, to file a suit, it has to be backed by a resolution of those chambers before such a suit can be filed. And the Senate leader is saying that there was never any such suit. They are required to, according to the leadership paper, they says it is not sure whether the Supreme Court, which is supposed to sit today, will agree to the withdrawal of that suit.
Why not? I mean, the Supreme Court is not foraging for work to do. The Supreme Court has enough work to do.
Yes.
And if an appellant says, listen, we are withdrawing our appeal, so we are withdrawing our suit, that's for the original jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, I mean, they will simply strike out the matter. It's as simple as that. In fact, we had here on the program last week the leader of the Senate, Senator Ahmed Lawan, of course, when he had expressed the reservation of the APC caucus on the Senate proceeding, with the suit. So now that the Senate, or those who filed the action in the first instance, are saying that, look, we have confidence in the National Judicial Council to properly handle the matter, and then we are withdrawing the suit from the Supreme Court. All they would need to do is to appear before their lordships and say that the suit it's been withdrawn. That's all. Okay, Bayo, let's take other headlines. New Telegraph, the lead story for New Telegraph. New Telegraph says, polls, that's the kicker. Army chief orders clamp down on IPOB. And says foreign conspirators plotting to disrupt elections. And two other writers there. It says 71 ex-generals and military governors, that's former military governors, endorse Buhari, and appeal court clears APC Rivers to field candidates. Of course, Bayo, you were discussing this story earlier. What has been reported is the decision of the Court of Appeal directing a stay of execution of the earlier order. Of course, when you are having different interpretations like this, you will have to await the certified true copy of the decision to be served on the appropriate persons or the relevant persons who, of course, ordinarily will be affected or who would ordinarily carry out the execution of the earlier order by the court of first instance. So you have claims and counterclaims and all other issues there. So above that headline, that lead story, and below the nameplate, let's just take two other stories there. Forbes says Dangote, Adenuga, Rabiu, and Alakija's net worth hits $20.6 billion. That's on page 5. Those are Nigeria's richest persons. And right there, also at the right side, it says Adeboye, that's Pastor Adeboye, prayed for me shortly before chopper crash. That's according to Vice President Oshibajo. And I return to the Nigerian pilot. Foot of the front page of the Nigerian pilot, we have a number of headlines there. Atiku in Zamfara promises to revive Bakalori Dam and tackle insecurity. That's on page 5. Okorocha vows to halt Uzodima's governorship ambition. That's page 9. The Nigerian Army declares war on IPOB over 2019 elections. All looters will face the law, Buhari vows. 41,000 persons died of cancer in Nigeria last year. Page 13 and on page 12, federal government set to repatriate more stolen funds from overseas. Lesson.
Okay, let's see some stories on the front page of the Punch. Just below the photograph, I'll read through this one. Federal government disagrees with IMF on economic growth forecasts. More details about that on page 27. 3 APC members killed in Lagos campaign clash. I guess that should be page 5. Humanitarian crisis in Northeast worsening. This is coming from Red Cross. More details about that on page 7. And other stories, I withdrew from race because of ACPN's leaders' greed. This is coming from Obi Ezekwesili. More details about that on page 26. Now, gunmen murder retired prisons DCG and also aid in Kogi. There's a writer to that story. Pregnant ex-bank employee jailed for defrauding Dangote. Pages 4 and 5 will let you into that story. Now, JAM registers 1.2 million candidates in 26 days. Details on page 37. Right.
Yeah, let's look at the Accident Investigation Bureau. It has looked into the helicopter crash landing at Kaba, and it said it has concluded its report. However, it's appealing to members of the public, if they have any video clips available, they should please provide it because it will help aid their investigation. Meanwhile, Punch's investigation revealed that the vice president had to resort to chartered helicopter because the 2 helicopters in the presidential fleet were engaged on Saturday. The vice president resorted to using the charter services to meet his next level campaign commitments at Kaba. Meanwhile, in Guernsey, Britain Accidental Investigation Team has found the wreckage of the missing aircraft at the seabed, and they say that a body was visible inside the fuselage. It is believed to be the body of the 28-year-old Argentine-born footballer Emiliano Sala, whose plane en route Cardiff for his debut was said to have crashed into the sea. The IRB say they are waiting the permission of the family to conclude their investigation. The body of the footballer and the pilot have been identified in the aircraft, in the fuselage. Meanwhile, it's a season of endorsements. You recall 11 days to election now. Over the last weekend, leaders of 4 sub-regional groups announced their endorsement of the PDP presidential candidate. Yesterday, 71 retired generals of the Army, admirals of the Navy, marshals of the Air Force, and former military administrators and military governors endorsed the candidature of President Muhammadu Buhari. The delegation was led by retired Brigadier General Buba Maro, and he said, "You have represented your constituency well. You announced a 3-point agenda: security, fighting corruption, and economy. You have kept your word as an officer and a gentleman." Responding, President Muhammadu Buhari said, "We have no other country but Nigeria. We will stay here and salvage it together." Well, individually, they all have 1 vote.
Well, Bayo, as you said we have 11 days to the commencement of voting. I actually would like to extend the calendar and to say that in 4 weeks' time, the results of the elections, barring any disturbances in some locations or other unforeseen circumstances, the results would have been known.
Yes.
Exactly.
And
28 days from now, all the results will be in.
And hopefully the nation will heave a sigh of relief. Political relief.
Absolutely so, because of course the presidential and national assembly elections are coming up, next weekend.
Yes.
And after that, 2 weeks later, you have the governorship and state houses of assembly elections, and those we'll see how it goes. Our business is to report and to get the analysts to discuss these issues.
Exactly, Kingsley.
All right, let's take our editorial this morning. It's coming from the Nigerian Tribune, and it's at page 13. And it's still on the elections. It's voting in IDP camps. Fire.
Yes, the editorial is saying that INEC has done well to ensure that our compatriots who are in IDP camps are not disenfranchised. However, they criticize INEC because some political parties and some civil society organizations are alleging that those venues could be avenues for rigging. They draw attention to the possibility of foreigners being brought into the IDP camps to vote. But foreigners, except they have PVCs, will not be able to vote. However, they have observed also that in 2015, internally displaced persons voted in Borno, Yobe, and Adamawa. But in 2019 elections, there are IDP camps in 15 states. And the effort by INEC is commended if they will be able to ensure that they are able to vote. And these are as an effect of the insurgency in the northeast, farmers-herder clashes in the middle belt, and also border conflicts involving environmental issues in the southeast. Therefore, the population of IDPs that will have to vote across the country will be expanded to 15 states of the federation. They challenge INEC to ensure that the credibility of the polls is not undermined.
All right, Vaya. Well, I'd like to thank you very much for coming on today's review and on the program. Wish you a very fruitful day.
Thank you, you too.
Okay. Watching Good Morning Nigeria, a break beckons at this point. When we return, it will be time to take a look at public service or servant and asset declaration. That's our discussion. Now to kickstart our discussion on the subject, that's public service and asset declaration. Our correspondent Oyeyemi Ajayi sampled the opinions of some Nigerians on asset declaration.
They should declare his or her assets because it is a base to checkmate the irregularities in the office.
I think it's a requirement of the law that you should declare your assets as a public servant.
Law now, it's a law. It's in the code of conduct bureau. Yeah, we declare every 4 years. Not, in fact, once you have a new promotion, you declare asset, and before you retire, you declare.
It's only a genuine man that would declare his assets, but someone that is fishy would not want to declare his assets. And there's a parable that said a clear conscience fears no accusation. So if you fear no accusation, you live a free life. So you're free to declare your assets to anybody. Everybody should know what you have.
We have a challenge in this country of theft. People steal and they think nothing happens. So if that could be a check, I think it's very fine.
What's happening in public offices today, they are the contractors themselves. They are one contract to themselves. So a lot of corruption is going on. So if they know that they are in public scrutiny, they will avoid such corruptions.
Yeah, it is necessary for public servants to declare their assets because that will enable, us Nigerians to know how much you have, before going to office, and while leaving office, people will be able to know how much, you'll be able to acquire while in office, so that we'll be able to know, whether actually you serve in that office the way you should or not.
Think about declaration of assets. So it's supposed to be something that we'll be doing quarterly or yearly. It's not something that you do once and forget it. And that's the problem we're having in this country. It's something that we have to be you have to be checking up regularly. For example now, if Mr. President has been declared the asset in the first year, there's nothing again at the middle of after 2 years to declare it again, to see how far. It is not when after they leave the party, they leave the office, they're now talking about declaration of asset. It is a must and must be checked either yearly or after 2 years.
All right, now that's a cross-section of Nigerians there expressing their views on assets declaration by public officers. We have guests, of course, with us in the studios here and also from one of our remote network centers to provide the legal, constitutional, as well as administrative perspectives to these issues. Let's now welcome Zephaniah Bulus. Bulus is Director, States and Local Governments Operations of the Code of Conduct Bureau. But of course, he will speak into the entire issue of assets declaration and the role of the Bureau. Mr. Zephaniah Bulus, pleasure to have you with us on the program this morning.
Thank you so much, and good morning, Nigerians.
Also here with us in the studios is Mohammed Bello Shehu, who is a public affairs analyst. Mohammed Bello, pleasure to have you with us on the program.
Yes, good morning, sir, and good morning to Nigerians.
Okay.
And in our Enugu studio, we'd like to welcome a professor of public law and Dean, Faculty of Law, University of Nigeria, Professor Joy Ngozi Ezelo. Professor Ezelo, welcome to the program.
Thank you, and good morning, Nigerians.
All right, Kingsley.
All right, yes, let's begin with the director from the Code of Conduct Bureau. What is assets declaration by public officers? What does it entail?
Thank you so much. Asset declaration by public officers entails the total balance sheet of one's assets, both movable, immovable assets, and also his financial profile. That constitutes the entire asset declaration by public officer.
When you say balance sheet, of course, when we say assets, some persons might think that it is all that is to your credit. But the law also provides for you to state your liabilities.
Yes, your liabilities based on the fact that you are responsible to them by law to service debts. So the total balance sheet actually cannot be said without the liabilities. So you declare your assets and liabilities all together. That serves as a balance sheet of your financial profile.
We know for different countries, the range for value placement on maybe whatever you have as assets could range from different places to other. What other values will you be looking at when you talk about asset movable or immovable?
We also talk about shares, debentures. You know, your business concern are all collectively put together as your assets.
No, let's, sorry, Zephaniah Zbulu, yes. Let's take this. We already talked about the balance sheet. Now you're getting into aspects of what lawyers would call choices in action. You know, you have your cash at hand.
Yes.
You also have your bank balances. Yes. Okay, you have your shares, you have others. Then, as you said, movable and immovable. If you have expensive furniture, let's assume Mohammed Bello is a public servant and he has antique furniture that is so expensive, you have generators and so on and so forth. What kind of items are you required to declare? Is it everything that you own? If you have the most expensive shoes, yours are not so expensive, not mind me. What are you supposed to declare as a public servant?
Okay, as a public servant, you're supposed to declare your balances in your bank account, your buildings, if you have farms, if you have orchards, if you have your vehicles, your generators, your furnitures are all part of assets that you're supposed to declare. In totality, you're supposed to declare everything that you own that you know constitute an asset to you.
Including luxury wristwatches and
everything, including them.
All right. Now, who is required to make this declaration as a public servant?
The public officers that are required to make this declaration, you find it in the 5th schedule, part 2, starting from Mr. President, the Vice President, the Senate President, the Deputy Senate President, the Chief Justice of Nigeria, all service chiefs, all military personnel, all local government employees, Chairman Code of Conduct Bureau and staff of Code of Conduct Bureau, every public officer. By public officers, we refer to those who earn remuneration from government. They are by law expected to declare their assets.
And that will include judicial officers,
all
judges,
judicial officers, so long as you are paid by the government, either at the federal level, at the state level, and at the local government level. Now, it also includes companies where officials of companies where government has controlling shares. They are all public officers by definition of the 5th schedule, part 2.
And this cuts across cadres and all levels?
In fact, from Mr. President to the cleaner that we have in public service.
That is, if the cleaner is getting his or her remuneration
from government.
And this is federal, state, and local. It also includes all military personnel.
Everyone, the military personnel, the police, civil defense, every
paramilitary
officer, paramilitary.
Okay, well, let's pause you in the meantime. Mohammed Bello Shehu, we'll pause you. Let's go to our Enugu Network Center. Professor Joy Ezilo, you, of course, listened to Zephaniah Bulus give us an indication, a broad overview of assets declaration and who is involved. I just would like you to perhaps give us a sense of the constitutional history of assets declaration. Some, of course, some would say that we didn't have this in our 1963 Constitution. Suddenly it popped up in 1979 and it's been retained in 1999. What could have been the rationale for getting this into our constitutional jurisprudence?
Thank you very much. Yes, you're right. It suffered for the first time in 1979, and ever since, all the other constitutional attempts, whether 89 or 95 that didn't materialize, all had provisions relating to Code of Conduct Bureau, asset declaration, and then, of course, the tribunal. But in 1999, we've seen, of course, that it has come to the National Assembly, following even 1979 constitution provision of this, also made an act which commenced in 1991 and supplement that's the Code of Conduct Bureau and the Tribunal Act, also the implementation of the constitutional provision. So when we are talking of public asset declaration by public officers or public servants, it is a constitutional matter, and it is a very serious issue, and very rooted in our Constitution, one that has also serious consequences, sanctions about whether you're vacating office or maybe we'll come back to the sanction. But going through, I mean, it's interesting reading the provisions of the Constitution to see how this run through, including whether even by not declaring your asset, whether a governor could have said to have even commenced or started his or her office, because it has also implication. Some of them have not been tested. Obviously, there are a few conflict and confusion with regard to that. But I'm glad that the Director Bulus also have explained the ambit of that, and that is actually within the tenement of within the tabulated constitutional provisions relating to that. Because sometimes when people think of public officers, they just think of political appointees and those holding high elected offices. But it's beyond that. And we can put it just like from everyone that earns money from the federal government, from a clerk to a cleaner, except, again, the president make a provision by order to exempt anyone. Otherwise, you are within that obligation. And what I think we have to look at, even in terms of the history of this, is what is the mischief behind this. If you notice how we've grappled under military rule, including with even false accusation decree and all of that, and then coming to have to our democracy and the transition we had, and then even the history of this country to a stage where we know that corruption has become a hydra-headed problem. So it was in a bid to fight corruption and, importantly, instill highest moral standard, which you will see even in all the military interlude, all of them referred to corruption, corruption, corruption. And when they had the Constitutional Drafting Committee, it became even a bigger issue. And we felt that that was the time to get this into the Constitution. So we have to look at the mischief. What is it intended to cure? This is a veritable tool in terms of fighting corruption in Nigeria. And we all know that corruption has eaten deep into the fabrics of Nigeria. But the issue is, how do we best? And they felt that if you have a constitutional provision, Constitution is a supreme law of the land. Everyone is bound by it. And if you look at the oath of office, oath of allegiance, it is specifically mentioned. Code of Conduct Bureau. So you must be in compliance with it. And if you look at provisions like Section 140, the president, before you assume office, you also have to declare your asset. As you're taking the oath of allegiance, you're doing that immediately. The same for governors in Section 180, 185. And if you look at Section 172, sometimes we don't even know the implication or the extent of application of this provision. Even a public officer, or even put it a public servant who is expected to earn a pension and the pension is even guaranteed by Section 173 of the Constitution. If you fail to declare your asset as required in Section 172, even that may be a ground that even your pension or whatever benefit you're expected to get from public service might be tampered with. Otherwise, it's a constitutional right. So that will show you the seriousness of the provision around asset declaration. But then the question is, there is a gulf here between the law and the practice in terms of the jury. And there is, people still haven't comprehended or understood the purport of this provision. And this is where public awareness will have to come in. And then where we'll always have to keep at the back of our mind why this provision, what it is, because ethics are public ethics. And people being able to live within their means. And observing, promoting or advancing accountability. They are all what is behind the ethical principles, higher standard, morality. These are all that is behind this provision. And being a constitutional provision, we have to, everyone is bound by it in the best interest of Nigeria.
Thank you very much, Professor Ezilo. We'll get back to you in the course of the discussion. Let's bring in Mohammed Bello Shehu. Yes. That's why there's been a constitution, now provision. She talked about issue of people maybe actually not comprehending what it is all about, or versus what we'll say, okay, maybe flagrant abuse of what is expected. What does this all signpost for us as regards issue asset declaration and public office?
Well, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, to speak on this issue. Like my brother here has said, this is a constitutional provision by virtue of the 5th schedule of the Constitution, as well as Section 153 of the Constitution. Nations that have achieved success in their ways of making public servants to be accountable to the nations, have always taken this provision as a very serious provision. Because we should remember, I think when President Muhammadu Buhari came on board, he made a statement that if we don't kill corruption, corruption will kill Nigeria. And this is precisely what seems to be happening. We have all these laws in the books, but for whatever reason, like the professor said, from the 1963 Constitution down to 1979 and to 1999 Constitution. This thing is a constitutional provisions, but no one seems to take it serious. Now, when you look back to the 70s, or even to the 60s, 70s, and early 80s, public servants were known to adhere to the provisions of the constitutions and various laws regarding declaration of assets. This same president, I think at some point he was mentioning that when you get promoted in the army from, let's say, lieutenant colonel to colonel, and you are sent to another command, you are expected to declare your assets. And they do abide by those principles. But over the years, because of the corruptions of the 80s and the 90s, Nigeria seems to have drilled. There is no nation in this world that can prosper properly without actually taking into consideration what goes on with the public servants and civil servants. When you have a civil service job, it's a trust. The people of a particular country has entrusted you with a trust that you are going to come and conduct your activities based on laws and orders without cutting corners and showing high standards of morality so that that nation can benefit from your service to that nation. But for whatever reason, over the years, we seem to have ignored. Like my friend here, Blue, said, it's not only politicians, it's not only public servants. Anybody that earns a salary within the system of local government, state government, federal government is expected to declare his asset, not one time, but at every point of your journey within the service, so that by the end of it, when you finish your service, you will be rewarded with a pension, and you know, you get that pension, and then you earn a living, and then you have at that time must have trained your children, and then you take over. If you look at the public servants of the 60s and the 70s, they abide by these principles and these laws. You know, I was just the other day, I was reading a book by late Adamu Liman Chiroma, not Adamu Chiroma, Adamu Liman Chiroma, who was one time, I think, secretary to the federal government, was former permanent secretary, retired at the age of 49, lived to be like 70-something years. I mean, I think every public servant should go and get his book and read. The title of the book is Testing the Grit of the Public Service. And there was also another book by Shehu Shagari, Beacon to Serve. You know, Nigerians seems to have lost touch with this type of credible public servants that use all their resources and energy to serve Nigeria well. The late Hassan Usman Katsina, I'm just going to cite this example. He was a very powerful military officer. After the unfortunate event of 1966, 65, 66, the crisis then, he was appointed as the governor of northern Nigeria. While he was governor of northern Nigeria, Yakubu Gowon then decided to divide the states into 12 states. He became a governor of Kaduna State. While he was governor, he needed just a plot of land. He needed just a plot of land for his own personal use. He applied, it was given. Whether it was Ali Akilu or one of the officers secretary to the government then, said to him, we cannot give you this plot of land now. It's your successor, whoever is going to be, that will sign this CFO for you so that you can take ownership of that land. That's the level of integrity that Nigerian public servants had. This guy was able to tell the governor, can you imagine this type of things happening now? You know, but now you have, I mean, people that take advantage, governors that bring in their families without no restraint, and those that are in like the stock exchange, you know, they do what you call insider trading. They give information on what stock is going up, what stock is going down, and all this. And so Nigeria seems to have drilled. The laws are there. And I think it's good that we are having this discussion so that Nigerians can know where Nigeria was and how we can restore that integrity component into our public service system. And we thank God that the president is taking a stand on this, and eventually I think we shall get there.
All right, Mohamed Bello, thank you very much. I would like to return to Professor Ezilo at our Enugu Network Center. Professor Ezilo, there's something I would like you to speak to. And by the way, we said that the Code of Conduct issue popped up in our Constitution for the first time in 1979, and it's been replicated in the extant Constitution of 1999. But when you take a look, again for the benefit of our viewers, when you take a look at the arrangement of the schedules to the Constitution, the Code of Conduct issue arises in the fifth schedule. It isn't just access declaration. There is a code of conduct for public officers. What is that intended to achieve so that if you see that adjacent, for instance, to CCB and Code of Conduct Tribunal, it tells something about, say, look, do not engage in the following, for instance, in the business or accepting certain kinds of gifts and so on and so forth. Tell us something about the arrangement of that particular schedule.
Of course, in the third schedule was the first to establish the Code of Conduct Bureau and its composition, etc. Then when you get to fifth schedule, starting from the section 1, and it is important we understand it. It said, a public officer should not put himself or herself in a situation where his personal interests conflict with his or her duties and responsibility. Of course, I'm making it gender sensitive because it said his duties and responsibility, and that is paragraph 1 of that fifth schedule. And then if you look at 6, which is also very important, it talks about, because people accepting 6, 9, 13, and before you get to the other provisions is important, because actually when you read it and in the Constitution, you see how that dovetails immediately to even oath of allegiance, oath of office, and then what is required. It leaves no one in doubt, especially the public officer, as to what is expected when, if you receive any property from any business or person that you have contract with, or anything outside, received of gift from personal friends or relatives at occasion, like we know, then, you are in contravention of that code of conduct. And then the consequences are there, paragraph 11, paragraph 13. So there is even the issue, because there are some a little bit of, confusing, but I don't think the fifth schedule is made in pursuant to section 153. And in a number of other sections, there is also reference to that. So it is clear, there is the issue of at what point will a public officer required. I think the act is also very clear. You are required immediately after taking office to declare your asset. But also there is also the issue, failure to declare that asset, how would that affect the commencement? The provisions say that you, in section 185, for example, a governor, if you have not declared your asset, you will deem not to have taken office. So that means that even any action you've taken may be declared illegal. That also shows the seriousness of the constitutional provisions around asset declaration. And the full purport, of course, people in high elected offices or public officers, they are beginning to understand it. But then there is still a gap between the rest of us that are considered as public officers, or put it better, public servant within the public service. That is the one that concerns everybody that earns money from government that we have talked about. So I hope that captures that. Is there any other thing that I'm missing out in your question? But again, the constitutionality of it is not in doubt. And then the act that National Assembly have made with regard to, that gives also further explanation, especially about the procedures of the Tribunal and Code of Conduct Bureau, is also very clear. There is the issue of course, declaration of assets of even unmarried children below the age of 18, which is taken also as the constitutional age, because that's also where you have a right to vote. You are expected to declare that of your spouse and that of your children as well. And then, of course, in the Acts, they mention under 21. But I think we take, of course, the constitutional provision that is clear in relation to that.
All right, but Professor Ezolo, thank you very much. If you are declaring the assets of your spouse mustn't be a public servant anyway. That's when you declare the assets. Bulos.
No, you declare assets of your spouse who is not a public officer.
Officer, that's right.
Now, so long as your spouse, he or she, is a public officer, then he's mandated to also declare his own asset. Yeah, differently.
So husband and wife who are in the public service will declare their assets separately, independently.
Yes.
And of course, for children who are married under the age of the age of 18, in the 1979 Constitution, it was age 21 that was put there, but the 1999 Constitution is not. Let's return to you, Bulos. Yes. What is the procedure for assets declaration?
Now, the procedure is simple. We have offices all over the Federation. What we encourage officers, public officers, to do is that by the provisions of the Constitution, it is mandatory on you to reach to Code of Conduct Bureau and obtain the form. We have a prepared form which is distributed to public officers free of charge, no charges. Now, once you collect this form, you are supposed to complete it. You give first information that is required of you is your particulars, the particulars of the declarant. You state your name, everything about you on that page. There's a provisions for you to fix a passport photograph. And then after completing the form to the best of your knowledge and ability, you're supposed to go before a high court judge and swear to it before you return the form to Code of Conduct Bureau. So that is the normal procedure for asset declaration. Now, on the other hand, over the years, Bureau discovered that public officers were reluctant on coming to CCB. So what we do is that we request nominal roles from agencies, ministries, departments, and agencies. We request nominal roles from them, and then we administer, we send forms to them so that they can complete and now return to the Bureau.
Okay, still with you, Mr. Bullis. Now, is it just in demanding for asset, maybe through forms like you would do? Beyond that, how is the subject of verification, following up on what mechanisms are there to actually verify, okay, this is what I declared? Yes, I could have gone to before they take the oath before the commissioner or whoever that is in place at that time. Subject to verification, because over time, you get to see, like what you pointed out, issue of public trust and integrity. How do you follow up on that from the CCB?
Now, the issue of verification arises when we receive forms. We're supposed to look at them carefully and diligently. Now, if you look at the total number, the totality of public officers from the states, from the federal, states, and local government, it runs into millions of public officers. Now, how do we ensure that each and every form is returned? You see, we have in our own wisdom to come up with the risk-based groups that we could identify to verify their assets. Now, we have 2 or 3 processes of asset verification. One is what we call the conference verification. Now, at the moment that you make submission of your form, an officer actually takes a look at the form and ensure first that what you have returned is complete. Okay. Now, areas where you don't have any asset, you are expected to declare that you don't have such assets. Now, at that point, the next point is for the conference verification. Selected officers are invited to the Bureau, and then we go through your asset declaration form. We look out for all the documents that are related to such declarations. Now, that is on the one side. The other aspect that we go into, we start looking at those things that you have not declared.
How do you know the ones that were not declared?
Those things that you have not declared, there are synergies, and then we expect the public to give information. So, you see, in a whole lot of it, you cannot be certain of what someone has not declared, because they are either declared, they are either acquired by proxies, or they are acquired by children, or they are stashed somewhere. Now, we have to, as a matter of principle, begin to look at those areas that we are likely to say, look, this particular officer, based on his profile, his employment profile, should be able to sell out somebody who might have acquired XY properties that is not listed. And occasionally, too, in the course of conference verification, there are situations whereby officers make a slip. By the time you ask somebody a question about a particular property, he makes a slip. And then you begin to know that, okay, XY officer has this property and this property that he has not declared.
All right, Bulus.
Yes.
Tell us something about the deadline for the collection, completion, and submission of the form.
Now,
in other words, today is the 5th of February.
Yes.
All right, 5th of February 2019. I come to you, I obtain the form from you. Let's say governorship. Are you with me? Since we are voting, yes. No. I'm not. I'm one of the presidential candidates. Well, tell us. I collected from you on the 5th of February 2019. What deadline do I have to complete and submit that form back to you?
Okay. Now, you are supposed to collect forms and submit it within 30 days of receipt of the form. However, take for instance a governorship, governor-elect who is meant to be sworn in, today is 5th, he's meant to be sworn in on the 10th, and he collects his form today. He must return that form before he is sworn in on the 10th. So the 30 days is not applicable in his case. And you know, all public officers, as mentioned by Prof, now, you are not supposed to commence the duties of an office without first declaring your asset. So you must declare your asset before you begin to exercise the functions and duties of that office. So, but for officers who are in continuing service, the civil servants generally, you are supposed to return after 30 days. And you're supposed to do a declaration every 4 years. Now, for elected public officers, you declare on assumption of duty, and you also declare at the end of tenure. So it's possible an honorable commissioner can be appointed today by His Excellency, and then in another 2 weeks, he is fired by His Excellency. So he must have declared his asset and will also have to declare even after 2 weeks of being fired.
Yeah, and by the way, let's just also clarify this. When we say public officers, the law, that's to say the constitutional provision, captures university lecturers. University lecturers, yes, whether at the state level, whether you're on strike, now or not, it covers everybody. Okay, that's right. So that's one point to make.
Now the key word actually is that whoever receives remuneration that is paid by the government, either the government of a state, the government of a local government, or the federal government, it's mandatory that you declare your asset.
Okay. Let's, Professor Joyce, I see you nodding. Where you've listened and so you have had you've completed your forms, over and over again. The burden on a declarant, isn't it one that is probably somewhat, some would argue, a bit heavy or somewhat unrealistic? Because some of the items, you complete and return this within 30 days and so on and so forth. Some persons who are of means, you remember the experience of Nelson Rockefeller when he was being cleared in the US in the 70s. How much of it can you remember, and how much value can you immediately, place attached to what you possess?
Anyway, if you ask Director Bulus, I'm sure once you go there to collect the form, they will record you, and then you're obliged to return it within 30 days. And with regard to, if you look at, it's every 4 years, and then, or an assumption of a new office, and then at the end of it. So for then, public servants, the rest of us, every 4 years, it shouldn't even be a problem. It's okay, because by then it's a reasonable time to have acquired either properties or make progress. We all pray for prosperity. I think everybody prays for that in this country, even if you're a cleaner in the civil service. So it's not that onerous. But then the problem is also management of that information and the capacity in terms of the bureau to do the verification, because that's where the big problem, where the issue comes. But I think it's more of, let us take again, what is the aims or the goals of this asset declaration? It is just to constantly remind us of public ethics, of ethics in service, because we are holding public trust, public offices, and we are expected to live within our means of livelihood, what we have earned or what we have worked for, and not enriched ourselves through abuse of power or our offices by receiving gift, by receiving property that we are not meant to receive. So because of that, 4 years is not too much. I had in the background documentary or interview that you did to some Nigerians talking about quarterly. I think then that would be too much, or yearly, that would then be too much. But for every 4 years, it's not too much. And then for those who are serving like a tenure of 5 years, you are expected then after every 4 years to do that, and then at the end of office, then that one you say is, but by then they have already the documents, and it's a matter of updating. So updating after you have the baseline document should not become as burdensome. And then the whole idea again is going to maintaining highest morality, ethical standard, promoting accountability, so that you always have it at the back of your mind that someone is watching, and that and that you have to comply with this ethical standard.
All right, Professor Ezolo, thanks. Actually, let me return to Mohammed Bello Shehu. What I was driving at, in terms of getting these figures, you have a 30-day ban. Well, of course, it includes all your possessions for you to incorporate into the assets declaration form. You'll be scrambling in your head to get the price of a generator, to get the price of furniture. Of course, if you get a receipt, the way we're somewhat careless with some of these things. I just buy this one, I just buy this, I just buy that. That's what I was driving at. But let's return again to the efficacy of assets declaration. The moral perspective is clear. But if 20 years or more after operating the Code of Conduct issues and so on and so forth, when it first came in 1979, and thereafter we now saw the rise of ICPC and EFCC, and they are getting more efficient and more efficient. What does that tell us about assets declaration? Are there things that we need to tighten up with regard to that particular tool, for instance, in dealing with a mischief, which is corruption?
Yes. Like Mr. President has said, if corruption, if Nigerians will not kill corruption, corruption will kill Nigeria. And there is this professor that said corruption is a potent cancer which has increasingly eaten deep into the state of, to a state of stupor. That's Professor Peter Nwangu, who spoke about corruption. And basically what it is that for any nation to attain to its own glory and potentials, that nation must be able to address this issue of corruption. And one of the greatest issues that is facing Nigeria today is public service corruption, whether it's in contracts award, whether it's in employment, whether it's in the way we do business. The trajectory is very clear. From the 60s and the 70s, you had zero corruption, almost. We had a prime minister who was assassinated with nothing. We had premiers that Ahmad Bello was killed. He had nothing, only one house. And we had military officers that left as generals. They had nothing. We had permanent secretaries and super permanent secretaries that retired from services, but basically own no property. So it's so important that this corruption must be tackled. And one of the ways that the provision of the Constitution has provided is through this Code of Conduct. You declare your assets. When you declare your assets, the agency responsible for this will go and verify to find out if you are telling the truth or not. And if you are not, you are tried and convicted. One of the things that we should always be concerned with is that if we continue along this line where people come and lie and say things and have undue advantage because they are private information or public information, that they use it to their own advantage, Nigeria is never going to be that nation where we all want to aspire and be able to become, a decent nation like any other person. I will give you an example. Places like in the US, UK, which to some extent I'm familiar with, as a public servant, from the very day that you are employed, put on a certain salary scale, all your information, where you live, what you do, will be listed. And at some point, not only the Code of Conduct Bureau, all the other various security agencies, once you become a civil servant, whether it's local, state, or federal, you will be under scrutiny. To some extent, even your telephone conversations. They will be checking because they considered public service to be the highest form of trust that is given to you. You know, you will be monitored. You wouldn't even know. Like I said the other day, if you're on salary on $100,000 per annum, they will look at your business transactions, what you do with your money. Are you paying mortgage? How much is your mortgage? Are you taking on vacation? Are you going on vacations? Is it 2 times, 3 times a year? There is somebody within one of the agencies, whether it's police, whether it's FBI, whether it's any other security agency, whether it's even a security agency within your own organization. Let's say you work for Human Resources Administration. There is Department of Investigations, which will also be looking at all your financial transactions and activity.
So what do you think has aided these developed climes in achieving that?
Yes.
So what do you think has aided them in achieving this high level of at least scrutiny and checks from time to time?
Because they realize the public servant is the highest trust being given to a citizen of a nation. You control whether it's border entry, whether it's dealing with people with disability, whether it's police officers, whether it's politicians. If you go down and destroy that system, you have destroyed the entire system.
It's a structural system.
It's a structural system.
So what are our own challenges here?
Yes, we have a lot of challenges. You know what I want to see in Nigeria, in addition to the Code of Conduct Bureau, the police, and all other security agencies, I will want to a situation in Nigeria whereby every property building that I can go and say 14B Ismaila Jibril Street in Gwarimpa, Abuja, I can go to a public registry or computer and just type and see who owns that. Who owns that property, and the history of that ownership of that property is going to come. For instance, as a public servant, I bought a building. I am required by law with my lawyers to submit that, I think within 7 or 14 days, go and register it in the public domain. And every citizen in that city or in the country will have access to go and check who owns what. And it will give you the history from this to this to this to this. Therefore, you have no place to hide. We have, like when the president came in now in Abuja, there are so many properties in Gwarimpa, Maitama, and other that people said they don't own it. But this thing has been linked to some of them somehow, but they try to deny it.
No, of course, they were gotten through processes.
Exactly, because remember, there was a time here in Abuja where land and property became even more expensive than New York, because some of these public servants have nowhere to hide this money. Now we thank God for the Treasury single account, and then also we thank God for the BVN. You know, like in the US, for instance, they have what they call social security number. Wherever you go, even if it's a drug you buy in a pharmacy, they said they will check the name and the social security number, they will link that drug to you. So you have no hiding place. If you rent a car, your name is so-so, they type your social security, they said, you know, you rented a car from this point to that point. We want that system to be placed in Nigeria. If you do that, you will catch a lot of public servants, judiciary officers that are properties and hotels all across, that they have got those properties using corruption, taking undue advantage of the system, and you know, destroying basically the public trust that we have, you know.
All right, Mama Bello, that's a very important perspective you have raised now, which has to do with public access to information regarding the assets of public officers of a certain category. We'll open up that aspect after we take this short break.
And culture.
You're still tuned to Good Morning Nigeria, showing live on NTA. Now we have reactions from members of the public. As you are a viewer, we'll look through them and we'll continue with the last phase of the discussion. This Twitter handle is from DW Nigeria Limited. Say millions of masters is in quotes, have not declared their assets. Is it the servants that will declare wholly or totally? Until we have severe punishment for non-declaration of assets, this trend of non-asset declaration will continue.
All right, Dele Jack Solomon said, no doubt asset declaration is a veritable part of sanitizing our corrupt civil service. Now, this is because information has it that properties owned by many of our civil servants are not built with their legitimate income. Also, these have been difficult, such properties have been difficult to trace to them because they are owned through proxies. There is a need, therefore, for proper registration of such property for ease of verification of ownership. Also, government should impose heavy property tax if this would help unravel the identity of ownership for sanction.
Yeah. Ibrahim Modu Aju tweets, greediness or greed, unpatriotic love for materialism, fear of what to do for living after retirement or a lapse of political appointment, coupled with the fact of fear of God, that's lack of fear of God now, what makes public officers not to come clean. Who comes with equity must come with clean hands.
This is from Shakiru Raufo. It says, civil servants are very strong, according to him, and exposed to government funds. Anyone that has 1 billion naira in a year in his or her account should account for it. There should be assets declaration.
Ogbeni Zah says Nigerians in public offices, of course, know the requirements of the law when it comes to asset declaration and the code of conduct. We have only either to shortchange the process, knowing fully well we run an egregious endemic system. But now the narrative is changing. Why the hoopla?
Cecilia Okoroma tweets, it's no longer news that people get into public offices as paupers, and sooner than you know it, they become stupendously wealthy. Public officers who swore to an oath to declare assets and fail to do so must be prosecuted. No sentiments for crying out loud.
Husseini Baba May says asset declaration is a very good idea, especially in a country like Nigeria. How I wish it to be effective in states and local government too.
Mike Ayakwo, now this is still a very big challenge, as asset declaration in the country, because a lot of civil servants shy away from asset declaration.
Another tweet from Ogbeni Zah says it's obvious the founding fathers actually planned Nigeria for greatness in her public life. However, successive leadership in the last 3 decades have been more of a curse than blessing to the nation. The leadership during this period seems to pervert the entire system.
This is from Ibrahim Saleh, Mohammed Saleh. Now, is it allowed for public officers to accept gifts from contractors, NGOs, and so on? And whenever a public officer is accepting a gift from the public, should it declare it on one of the daily newspapers while in office before his or her retirement? CCB, take note. Let me tell that again. It says, is it allowed for public officers to accept gifts from contractors, NGOs, and so on? And also, whenever a public officer is accepting a gift from the public, he should declare it in one of the daily newspapers while in office before his or her retirement. CCB, take note.
Ibrahim Moduaji has this other tweet. Naturally, public officers want to make extra cash outside their basic salaries and allowances. This is where corruption and false asset declaration comes. Integrity, patriotism, morality, fear of God should be the watchwords of our public office holders.
Jack Solomon says the Constitution created the CCB, that's Code of Conduct Bureau, to receive and verify the asset forms declared, and the CCT to try and punish those who act in breach. Unfortunately, both the CCB and the CCT have not lived up to expectation due to poor funding, lack of independence, as well as challenges of competence.
This tweet is from Emmanuel Olono Nuha. It says, in declaring my assets, there's a question now, do I also need to declare money given to me to be kept by a third party, but in a bank account as at the time of making my declaration?
Bulus.
Bulus.
That's an interesting question, actually. Why would you collect money and keep for someone in your account? As a public officer, you are expected to declare the proceeds in that account. Now, declaration is also made as at the date of declaration. Now, if you want to give us your bank statement, it should be as at the date of that declaration. So if you have somebody's monies with you at that point, you have to declare it. And you must declare whether you collected a loan or it is kept in self-custody. Mm-hmm. But I don't see the rationale behind you are taking money and keeping it in a bank for someone anyway as a public officer, because you know you must account for every single money that you have in your account.
And the form is also clear for you to state the source of whatever you have. Yes. So if it is by inheritance, for instance, you state it. I was just wondering, again, there are all kinds of possibilities in human existence. If a public servant is a gambler and he wins big in a lottery,
is he expected to declare too?
A public servant being a gambler is unethical. You see, a public servant is expected by law the Bureau is expected to establish and maintain a high standard of public morality in the conduct of government business. And then you have to ensure that the actions and behaviors of public officers conform also to the highest form of morality and accountability. Now, a public officer who is a gambler is actually in breach of the Constitution, is actually in breach of the provisions of the Constitution.
So you say, I play the lottery?
Yes.
I'm not one. I'm just giving, yes, I'm not one. I just say, I play the lottery.
Well, if you play a lottery and possibly won, maybe you got 1 million or 10 million.
Sweepstake.
Yeah, but it has to be paid into your account. Yes. Now, so long as it doesn't contravene the Money Laundering Act, then you're good to go. So, yeah, but you have to declare.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's get back to...
I'll just bless him. You know, there was a point that Mohamed Bello was already getting into in terms of public access.
Access to such.
Part of the challenge that Nigerians have raised with regard to access declaration, particularly for politically exposed persons, but I think that one aspect has been dealt with now, anticipatory declaration, which is not allowed, is to say, fine, I make my declaration, and I submit my form to you, and the forms are domiciled with you. Members of the public don't have access to this. So how then would you expect members of the public to give you the requisite intelligence that will aid your verification process?
Members of the public usually are very sensitive to lifestyle of people. And the first thing they do is they want to know. They seek to get information. But you see, again, we also encourage members of the public to raise complaints where they feel information is being held back. I agree with you that members of the public need to know. It has been a very big debate. Should asset declaration be made public, or it should not be made public? It has been a very big debate. Now, there are situations, there's an example of a country where public officers made public declaration. One of them, the following morning, got all his houses burnt down because he had declared them publicly. Now, the question was not how he acquired them, but you see, some people were just after him, and all they could do was just to go down and burn all his houses because it was done publicly. Now, do we have the capacity to handle the outcome of such public declarations? That remains a big question.
Do you?
Do we have as a nation? You know, it's also a moral burden on everyone in the country. Can we afford to contain the crisis that could come as a result of public declaration of
What are the
assets?
likely crises?
Of
your
course, I just
perspective?
gave you an.
That's right.
I just
Okay,
gave you
yeah.
an illustration.
Okay.
So,
and then
such are things that are likely going to happen.
And then you
but
could also
see,
have
by law again, the powers of the Bureau is to retain custody of such declarations and also make them public for inspection, but based on terms and conditions that may be prescribed by the National Assembly. But as at today, those terms and conditions have not been made.
All right, let's get back to Professor Ezilo in Enugu. We still want to pursue this aspect of public disclosure, or how safe, or at least for the members of the public to actually wade into this. Should we have access to issue of the asset declaration forms of this either politically exposed persons or high office holders? What's your take on that? And does this in any way contravene the aspect of maybe the Freedom of Information Act and all the attendance laws that are backing the issue of public scrutiny?
Thank you very much. It's important you raised it because actually access is guaranteed to any citizen under the third schedule, I think is paragraph 3. So Director Bulus read part of it. It says they retain, the declaration is given to the Bureau retains it, and they can give access to any citizen of Nigeria with regard to that, on that subject to terms and conditions as the National Assembly may make. And of course they've made it, because in the Freedom of Information Act, that's part of it. So if you request based on FOI, I think that they will oblige you, because there is a law to that effect that has given meaning to that. I don't think we have to take it specifically in isolation to making a law that will be expressly or pursuant to Section 153 and the 5th Schedule or 3rd Schedule. The issue here, and I think that is where protection of that declaration comes in. So if you want, I know people can argue, make it public, just like one of us have said, so people can Google know who is owning this property. And I want to say that that is even happening, even without this intervention of law, by various states, by the issue of tax laws and tax practices and structures that is being put in place. Where I live, I just noticed recently, trying to pay tax, state tax, you try to put in some of they were giving IDs to every house in Enugu. You immediately see your house. It already have even an ID, and you can tell who lives here by your filling the necessary information. So we're even coming to that. But back to issue of access to information, I think once you apply under that FOI Act, they should be able to give you access to that. And then that will have fulfilled the basic condition. At least you can track if anything happens to that public officer or anything. You can say this person demanded an access, demanded information, and it was given to the person and he paid the necessary fees, and this is documented. And then you can track if problem arise out of it. I agree that we don't have the capacity, and this is not limited to CCB, in terms of managing this information. And there are people who may have earned decently, and we know that also quite a number earn corruptly. But if you just put out what they have, it exposes them. And then, it exposes them to a lot of risk. Even data management in this country is still problematic. But I think increasingly we're all running an open society. The world is becoming even a global village. People can see us from any part of other world by Google Map and everything, and we get to where we want to get to. So by and large, inevitably, the system will open up. That will come to extent. If every state has put in a tax structure where they have property tax and buildings, definitely they will know who owns the building, because you have to pay your tax, and you can put in and immediately find out who owns it. And increasingly it will reduce even the pressure or the tension or CCB to disclose, because you will know. And you will also, if public is given access to this information without too much rigor, I don't believe that they have to, just once you apply, and then in accordance with the Act, FOI for example, you should be given access to that, because they have interest and they are holding public trust. And I think CCB have used their discretion as well, because there are potentially high risk people also, even in terms of not only contravening, but in terms of breach of that public trust because of the offices they are holding and because of the attraction of that office and because of the pervasive corruption we have in order to promote accountability that they declare. They should verify. So where there is even gap is issue of verification, and I don't believe they have all the capacity. And there is issue of even independence of the body in order to be able to do their work. And then I believe that they should also get down not only to every level, just like when you bank, you have a line manager, for example, if you're a big customer or something like that. That it should come to a time where even within CCB they will have line sort of for certain officers. I said, okay, so you can ask questions. It becomes something that they have better communication with them, and they make sure that people file as at when due and updates are done and verifications that are done. There are areas that are burdensome, of course, and I think they should review that. If you come to a situation where you have to declare everything, I believe that also they guide people. If you have furniture, it should be just furniture. And if you begin to break down my table, no, I don't think they expect that. But then he mentioned generator, and in this country where people have several, and then you keep breaking down and you have to, keep going. I think there should be an amount. I know the constitutionally and the act, they put 1,000 naira. If you earn anything more than 1,000 naira, 1,000 naira is not the value, of course, is down. They should be able to put a peg or a cap on it to say if you have a property worth this amount or this, then you can begin to make declaration in relation to that.
All right, Professor Joy Zulo, thank you very much. Professor Joy Zulo is talking about an incremental movement, towards an open society. And this is, of course, coming by way of increased documentation, whether property or personal income tax, and several other things, including also the rise now of electronic land registries, in some parts of the country. And NATI, that's the Extractive Transparency Initiative, it's also working on what it refers to as the Beneficial Ownership Register of persons, who have interest in the extractive industry, whether it's solid minerals or in hydrocarbons. But Mohammed Bello, you're looking for a much more rapid drive towards public declaration of assets or public access to funds or assets that have been declared. Would you recognize the potential crisis that will arise from that in terms of our capacity to manage too much information out there in the public domain?
We should run an open society. Democracy is government of the people, by the people, for the people. We're no longer in a military administration. So societies that have progressed, we always people like to quote United States, UK, and other things, I just like to make this point. When the democracy started in places like US and UK, they don't have that many educated elites at the time of their infancy to the period within which they grow to where they are now. If you are looking for, sophisticated Nigerians in terms of education in any field, now you can find them in Nigeria, not only in Nigeria but outside Nigeria. So Nigerians should be able to tolerate free flow of information. We want a situation whereby from Abuja to Kaduna to Port Harcourt to Lagos, that public citizens can have access to information. They should be able to tell you who owns what in Nigeria, whether it's companies, whether it's properties, whether it's a civil servant that has submitted his information to your Code of Conduct Bureau, and what he has. This thing should become public information. That's the only way that you're going to stamp out corruption. Like I said when the president came in, there are individuals now that are denying they own a property in Gwarumpa or in Maitama because the president is very much determined to stamp out corruption in Nigeria. If we have an open society, believe me, there is no hiding place. Like I said the other time now, you cannot take like $10 million or $1 million and say you want to take it to your own domiciliary account. simply because now it's a game changer. You
All right,
can
thank
you
you.
can no longer put that money without your
Without being
BVN,
traced.
without being traced.
Okay,
So we want that situation in Nigeria, and that's the only way that Nigeria can become what it ought to be, and that his agency, I will call on the President and the National Assembly to empower his agency more. That anybody who decides to go on public service should know what he is going into. Public trust, no discrimination. You have to treat all Nigerians. You have to have some moral principles. You have to not to take advantage of what you find in that system to enrich yourself and your family.
I just very briefly, Professor Joy Ezilo. Professor Joy Ezilo, very briefly, we don't have enough time. Is the sanctions regime for non-access declaration, is it sufficient as provided in the law, in the laws, including the Constitution?
Yeah, I think it is, because even though it is non-criminal, there are also aspects that can transform to becoming criminal. But then the sanctions, if you look at the paragraph 18 of the 5th schedule, the issue of vacating your office or losing the seat if you're a legislator, the issue of forfeiting even the asset to the state. So you run the risk of forfeiting entirely all the asset to the state, and also being stopped from holding any public office for a term not exceeding 10 years. These are heavy sanctions, because it means you have been contravened and you have been pronounced guilty of contravention of that of the code of conduct. So it's a very serious matter, even if it's for 1 year or 2 years, because it will be there and it's written. And then also there is possibility of further trial for other related crimes under EFCC, money laundering, and ICPC. So it doesn't stop that from activating other sanctions. So I think it is sufficient. We should think more about how to effectively implement a current provision in the fight against corruption.
Thank you very much, Professor Joy Ngozi Ezilo, Professor of Public Law and Dean, Faculty of Law, University of Nigeria. Thank you for joining us. You joined us from our Enugu Center. Okay, we'd also like to appreciate Mohammed Bello Shehu, Public Affairs Analyst. Thank you very much for your insight. Our appreciation also to Zephaniah Bulus, Director, State and Local Government Operations, Code of Conduct Bureau. Thank you very much for coming on the program.
Thank you very much.
We'll also quickly appreciate those other people tweeted, Amos, then Julius, Ritma Tangu, Suleiman Zuntu, Chris Simeon, Ibrahim Mohamed Saleh. Thank you, but time really is not on our side to actually look into that. Let's go to our complimentary segment now. That's Good Morning Nigeria for today. Tomorrow is another time to join us. My name is Blessing Abu. Have yourself a great day.
And I'm Kingsley Osalolo. I join Blessing in thanking you for being with us. As she said, we are back tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Until then, have a lovely day ahead.